What's going on, golf fans? It's your boy GS Luke here with our round 4 live stream for the Masters. Gonna get you ready for all of your showdown exposure with a look at the weather report, some strategy out there for tomorrow, as well as some contest selection and some lineup construction towards the end to get you ready for all of your Sunday lineups. So hopefully your Saturday is treating you guys nicely. I had some time with my family, was able to get some steak and lobster in the belly, a little bit of wine out there as well. So enjoying ourselves over here on this moving day and ready to talk for all the golf out there tomorrow, which looks like we've got ourselves quite a Sunday ahead. We've got Rory leading the Masters. I mean, we couldn't write a better storyline if we tried to heading into the week. And Bryson only about 2 shots back. We'll talk about all of that here in this video. But any questions, any deep dives that you guys want, feel free to go ahead and let me know in the chat. We'll be getting to those a little bit later on here. But welcome on in. We've got Jason down there already. Jay Ramos down there as well. By the way, Jay Ramos, I appreciate the kind words there. Always the big Luke gang when we have ourselves a good day. And today, guys, went 11-0 on our props over there on Underdog and Prize Picks. So I know a lot of you guys follow me over there on my Patreon for that sort of stuff, or over there on my free content on Twitter or on YouTube. Pretty good day over there as well. So we got Alan down there, Nick, Go Collect down there in the chat, Greg, Easy Bets, Mark. Also, we got Michael and Albert down there as well. Hop on into it out here for Sunday's action. So the first thing I like to focus on would be the course averages from today, which you can see played easier in the morning, which was what we kind of expected heading into the day. We did think that the winds would be lower the early parts of the day, and also that the greens might firm up a little bit. Now, you did have the better players teeing off later, so that's probably why it was only about a 0.3 shot difference. Not enough to go out there and full stack it one way or the other. And in fact, if we take a look at the top scores from today, plenty of them went off later. So Zach Johnson, one of the first few guys off, he'd be an example of an AM guy that had that pop performance. But Rory McIlroy at -6, guys like Bryson went off a little bit later. Aubert was also technically in that PM wave because he was in the second half of tee times. It didn't really matter what side you went out there and played. It was more so just trying to find your poppers. And a few pieces of chalk went off. Obviously, Rory McIlroy at -6 was one of the more popular players towards the top end of the board, but also quite a few lower owned guys like Zach Johnson. Echeverria wasn't that highly owned out there. Also, Max Homa over there with the -3 round. And you're going to get that same kind of mix for tomorrow because when we take a look at the forecast, it looks pretty flat across the board, but you will have the greens getting a little bit firmer as that day goes on. With the Sunday Showdown aspect, you are going to be favoring some of your later starters too, because you have those placements points in play out there on Sunday. But just like today, don't be surprised if some of those mid to early guys break the slate with like a -3 or a -4 round. And especially when you're in those $5 or $25 GPPs and you're playing against 10,000 or more entries, having those lower owned, those 5 to maybe 10 percenters out there in your lineup that are getting to that 45 to 50 point threshold is key for taking down any sort of showdown contest. So the weather isn't really, leaning towards one side or the other, but because of the kind of slate that we have here with the placement points, you're going to need players from across the board. So pretty typical of what we get over there for round number 4, but worthy of reminding you guys in case you're not used to playing golf out here every single week. Next thing I like to do is take a look at the round 3 stats. Same thing that we did out there for the round 2 and 3 showdown streams is look at some of our ball striking poppers. And, just like the last few rounds, guys that were excellent off the tee and on approach are going to be worth some extra consideration the next day. Now, Zach Johnson was green across the board except for his around the green play. You can see also, though, went out there and gained 2.5 strokes putting. I wouldn't expect a senior tour level player like Zach Johnson to do that in back-to-back days, but a Ben Yan over here that gains nearly 4 strokes ball striking, but then lost a little bit over 2 strokes with a putter could be a really good bounce back candidate. And you'd say that about a Joaquin Niemann. Ball struck it well, but lost a little bit over a stroke there putting. Rory McIlroy, actually, he was really good from tee to green. Did get a little bit lucky around the green, though, so that is a little bit of a red flag in that category. But ball striking gained over 3 strokes there and didn't even get all that lucky with the flat stick. So Rory McIlroy, we'll talk about him from the game theory perspective, especially when it comes to actually building lineups, but I don't think that he's unplayable with this sort of stat profile. Guys like Justin Rose also had really good ball striking days. Worth noting that guys like Justin Rose had the hot putter out there for days 1 and 2, and then today you saw that short game come back down to earth. He was well into the positive out there in both categories the first few rounds, and today lost 6 strokes or nearly 6 strokes out there between the short game category. So that's why we try and find guys that are ball striking it, but that are maybe due for some short game regression, because these categories tend to be the most variant that we have in golf. The other guys that stand out, Morikawa ball striking it, but not having the best short game day. Charles Schwartzel, that same sort of stat profile. And then Steven Yeager didn't have the best off the tee play today, but he did gain over 2 strokes on approach and then lost in those 2 short game categories. So I'm not saying that I'm going to play every single player that we just talked about there, but especially the ones that are a little bit further down the board, like a Schwartzel at T37, a Morikawa even starting at like T14, could be a little bit lower owned than some of the other guys around them. It could be used for some leverage in your lineup. So that's what I'm looking for out there in the stat profile. Short game, as I mentioned, is something that we're looking to regress to the mean. So these guys that lost a whole bunch of strokes putting or around the green could be in for a little bit of a bounce back. So Minwoo Lee, Hideki Matsuyama, obviously not doing the best in those 2 short game categories, but also guys like a Wyndham Clark, a Matt Fitzpatrick could be due to come back down to earth a little bit. And that would be in the positive way, right? Not in the negative way of like gaining a whole bunch of strokes putting, because these kind of guys that gained over 2-3 strokes putting in the category got a little bit lucky today. So John Rahm, I played in a bunch of lineups, was more than glad to have him go out there and putt like he did today, but I'm not going to count on that happening 2 days in a row. So a Grazeman, O'Bear, Jordan Spieth, Bubba Watson, Patrick Reed, all up there gaining over 2.5 strokes putting, are guys that I'm going to kind of bump down a little bit out there with my projections. Around the green, you can see the same exact thing. So these guys that gained over 2 strokes around the green, highly unlikely to go out there and happen back-to-back days. So your 2 leaders, Rory and Bryson DeChambeau, that would be a category that works against them a bit. But guys like Jason Day, Sungjae Im, Tommy Fleetwood up there towards the top, also not the best stat category for them. And when you look at the bottom end of that board as well, these could be players that you look to for a little bit of a bounce back. And, a Watson, a Danny Willett losing over 2 strokes in that category, not going to happen very often out there in the PGA Tour. Now, because it is Sunday Showdown and you're going to have to play some placement point guys, some chalk up there towards the top end of the board, what I usually like to do when determining who to take at like 40-50% exposure, I was looking at the whole event stuff, right? So not just looking at the round 3 stats like we were looking at just now, but looking at what they've done for the whole first 3 rounds. So for example, ball striking wise, Rory McIlroy has been the best by far out there in this field. And typically my strategy for Sunday exposure, and I haven't built my player pool yet, I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to do with Rory, is typically to fade the guy that is out there with a 2 or 3 stroke lead, because they're not going to be aggressive out there in their exposure. On top of that, they're going to be by far the most popular player. That is even more so the case when you have somebody leading and they're up there in that 11K range. You're talking about like 50, maybe even 60% ownership out there on a Rory McIlroy. So a lot of times when we're on Sunday Showdown like this, I'll fade the guy out there with the sizable lead just because they won't be as aggressive and they're not going to go for birdie as often as some of the guys that are trying to chase him down. But the unfortunate aspect here that makes this maybe a little bit different, I'll have to see what I do with my exposure, is that he has by far the most impressive stat profile. He's been average over there with the putter, whereas like everyone else towards the top has been gaining a whole bunch putting, and he's gaining over 10 strokes over there with the ball striking categories. And most importantly, we care the most about the approach play, 7.5 strokes out there with the iron so far. So it makes them a little bit of a tough fade. And when you're using these kind of stats, it's good for choosing towards the top end of the board there. So if there's any players that you guys want me to deep dive here in a few minutes, feel free to go ahead and let me know down in the chat. But overall, that's how I utilize my process over there when building a player pool to get an idea of what kind of guys I'm using in lineups. And the other thing to consider after that would be the actual DraftKings side, where you kind of want to have an idea of who you're playing before you go out there and reserve lineups, because if you've got a whole lot of chalk that you just insist on going out there and playing tomorrow, you might want to stick to some of the smaller field GPPs. Whereas when you're going through your lineup building process, maybe you like a lot of these round 3 ball striking poppers that were a little bit further down the board. Let's look at the other side of it and bring up some of those players. Then maybe you do play on the large field GPPs and take a stand against the rest of the field. So, depending on the kind of guys that stand out in your process during this section, section, it might put you on different kind of tournaments over there for tomorrow. So the first thing of noting is that these contests are juiced over there. I mean, an 800K big $25 GPP is the biggest that we've seen this entire year. You've also got some random contests like this one here. It's a $600 28 max. This is an insanely big contest over there for tomorrow. You still have your $250 4 max, so still like a lot of your cookie cutter contests that we're getting for all these kind of events. But like even the long drive single entry, that's your $100 single entry contest, is even larger than usual. And the best part about it is that the payout structure is still flat. You still only have 10% out there to first place, so they didn't ruin the payout structure while making it bigger. And even the quote unquote secondary, so this is the smaller $100 single entry, is usually where we have it out here for these showdown slates. So a lot of really cool contests to enter. I'm probably going to enter more money than usual just because of that. And this is the big $5 GPP that they're offering out there. It is still top heavy with a fifth going to first place, but it is a 100K prize pool, which is significantly larger than what we're used to seeing. So you got this $33 single entry. It's a 20K contest, a great payout structure with 10% to first place. No complaints over here from this perspective. They're giving us some of the best contests that I've ever seen over here from the showdown perspective. And the same thing out here for round 4. This is the $10 18 max that we point out quite a bit. It's still larger. It's still up there to 20K like it was for yesterday. And the same kind of payout structure that we've had for the first few rounds as well. So overall, the contest selection is great. If you want to play in large field GPPs, you've got some really big ones to go out there and take down. The $100 single entries, though, the $33, the smaller kind of GPPs, or I think the absolute nuts for tomorrow. So, if you're siding towards those kind of contests, which is kind of where I'm looking right now, I'm probably going to be able to play a little bit more chalk than usual. Whereas if you want to take down a 200K contest or one of these other, the big $5 drive the green, like we were just looking at there, then you got to get a little bit more creative about it. So that's where you might want to go back to some of those lower owned kind of round 3 ball striking poppers and try and incorporate those guys into those lineups. The other thing we have out here for Sunday is making sure that we're incorporating our game theory. So you want to have a few guys starting towards the top end of the board, but you're still going to need 2, maybe even 3 pivots out there per lineup to go out there and get that leverage. So what we're going to do for our lineup construction segment here, for the lineup that we actually build together, is we're going to build for like that big drive the green. So one of the larger GPPs that you have on the slate, I believe it might be just a little bit smaller than that big $25. But as I was mentioning, with going through some of the round 3 stats, we're going to have to get ugly with at least a few players. But before we get ugly and trying to find that leverage, let's try and find our conviction plays towards the top. So for the sake of this, I'm going to start with a Rory just because the shots gained stats look pretty hard to pass up at this point. I want to see how Patrick Reed played today. So let's go through Patrick Reed here real quickly. Round 3 was neutral, then gained out there with the putter. Days 1 and 2, though, the ball striking was on point. Round 2, the approach play kind of fell off, but round number 1, he gained over 2.5 strokes out there with the ball striking. So Reed may be an option that you could use towards the top end of the board, but going through some of the players on here, we're going to need a cheap guy. So let's throw in Patrick Reed there. And then let's throw in J-Day there at $8,100. So we've got 3 guys where we can kind of count on the placement points coming in there, which you're going to need, right? If you're going to take down the absolute nuts, win that big $200,000 prize pool, 20K prize pool like you have there in that drive to green, you're going to have those 3 guys towards the top that shoot -3, -4, and end up in that top 3. And then you're going to need your 2, 3 other spots. It might be even 4 guys that you're taking kind of towards the top end of the board. Your other spots, though, are going to have to be guys starting a little bit earlier in the day that have that nuclear round at low ownership. So to go back to our stat averages that we were looking at from round number 3, like a Charles Schwartzel would be a really good player to use in this scenario. So let's throw Charles in here just to try and get some leverage, but also a player that's played well at this golf course before and has the kind of stat profile that we're looking for. The added benefit at 6,100 is that it's giving us a little bit of extra salary savings as well. I'm going to throw in, hey, if you were in like a smaller field GPP, you could probably throw in a Colin Morikawa here too at that sort of ownership, but the price tag is a little bit too prohibitive for us to go that direction. Maybe a Joaquin Niemann could be an option. So he's a little bit cheaper than what you have there with Morikawa. So Niemann's there at $8,700. Not giving you a ton of placement points, right? Same thing with Schwartzel starting there at T37, but they are giving us a little bit of leverage. And for your last man in here, because even Niemann, who's a leverage play, we'll put in quotes there, is still going to be over 10% because of that is price tag at that portion of the board, your last man in here has got to be a piece of leverage. So a Sun GM does not work as your last man in for this sort of lineup. You'd really want to look to any other player in this range that's starting at T25 or worse. Still go through your shots gained metrics, use your process to find a player that sets up well out there for the last round. But you need that leverage to offset that chalk towards the top. Now, if you were in something like a smaller field GBP or even a single entry, especially like the 200 entry single entry like you have for that big driver, then maybe you can use the Sun JM as your last man in because you've got Schwartzel and Neiman as your quote unquote pivots. But those big $5, $25 GBPs is where you want to make sure to stay off of that as your last man in. So that's the lineup construction segment. That's what you should be thinking about when building lineups. The only other thing to consider is if you were in a cash lineup, something where you're only trying to beat 50% of the field, maybe a double up as well would fit that description, then you don't worry about the ownership at all. You can play a lot of the guys starting towards the top end of the board, but still make sure you're going through your process of trying to find a player pool and find guys that set up well out there for Sunday, because, you know, making a cash lineup doesn't just mean to go out there and jam in what your optimizer says. You still want to have guys that you think are trending in that right direction. So let me see if there's any player deep dives that we need to do down there in the chat. But that is all I've got over here for the round 4 showdown slate. Go ahead, smash that like button if you guys haven't already, and also subscribe so you guys don't miss any of the content to come. On top of this, I will remind you that we do have the prop and betting live stream, which will be over there on my YouTube channel a little bit later on tonight. And considering that we went 11-0 on our props out there from today, you probably want to check that out if you're playing over there on Underdog or Prize Picks, or over there on some of the sports books for your matchups. So make sure to check out my YouTube for that. Again, GSLukeDFS, or over there on Twitter/X, where I'll be posting some announcements over there from that perspective. But let's see where we left off. So questions on specific players. Let's see where we have those there. Appreciate that, Ed. Say great prop day indeed. It surely was. What's going on? To Peach, welcome on in. Dude wore his fancy hat for the steak dinner. Yeah, the one with the logo on it, as I'm sure you guys can see there over there to the side. It was just me, my brother, my mom, and my stepdad. So it wasn't like some like big family gathering. It was a great night. I love catching up with my peeps. I love them to absolute death. Every time I see them, it just makes me happy. I'm in a much better mood tonight because of that. By the way, smash that like button if you guys haven't already. Also, subscribe so you don't miss anything to come. If I believe Rory comes back to the field even with placement points, do you have to have him? No, you don't. So the thing to mention there on the pulse is if Rory shoots like even par and wins, that would require Bryson to not really have his best stuff either. Rory does not have to be an optimal play. To get there, to ensure that he's going to be an optimal play, he probably has to shoot at least -2. If he's shooting -2 with like 4 birdies and he wins the golf tournament, it's going to be hard for him not to be the top scorer on the slate. But he does have to give some of that scoring aspect. So great question there, man. And he is far from a shoo-in. Campbell's out alone at 940. Well, I know that means Nick is going to be playing him then. You think that 3 players in your 5 lineups and no 2 in the same lineup? Okay, I hear you on that. Rory on steroids, or he's really an alien possessed? Yeah, man, I tweeted that earlier today myself. It looked like he needed a piss test or something. I mean, 370 down to hole number 1, 360 down hole number 2. That was really cool stuff. You could tell he was jacked up, man. I mean, those first 3-4 holes when he was out there on that absolute torrent stretch, that was special. I mean, you don't see that ever, guys. Like, just know if you were watching that broadcast today, remember that for the next 10, 15 years. You don't see a run from a golfer under that much pressure that often out there in tour. I know it wasn't Sunday. Like, Sunday at the Players last year, right? Scotty went out there and made that kind of run. They are rare. So cherish them when we get those kind of performances, because he was truly locked in today. It was rough watching Rose putt today. Yeah, losing 4.5 strokes putting. I kind of felt bad for him too. How many lineups are going to start Bryson and Rory, and is fading both of them smart? I'm not sure I'd say fading both of them is smart, but it would be a way to get different to the rest of the field. And how many are going to start with both of them together? I would imagine quite a few. I'm going to have Rory over 50% ownership, maybe even close to 60%. Bryson DeChambeau, I'm probably going to have close to the 30-40% mark, I'd imagine, over there with my projections. But there's still probably going to be a contingent of 5 to maybe even like 10% of lineups that use both of those together. Yeah, an absolutely insane week we have cooking right now, Ross. Just, dude, this leaderboard, like I said, we could not have framed it better heading into this golf tournament. Is Rory, so you're going to use Rory, I guess, in your $100 single entry. Okay, I'm not against that. I think he's probably the best play on the slate if we're just looking at it objectively, but we'll see if he gets there tomorrow. The best bet you've got is Echeverria at 18-1 for the top debut, currently -4. So you're going against Thompson, Grayson, and McCarty. 18-1 for somebody that's already up there feels like a pretty good piece of value. So yeah, if you're getting 18-1 on that, no pushback from me, especially for somebody that's already in the mix. First time you'll ever type this to be pivot with Scotty. I mean, Sunday Scotty's a thing for me, man. I think Scotty's by far the best Sunday player that we have on tour right now. So yeah, if you're telling me he's going to be low owned today, he actually was pretty low owned out there in contest, then yeah, give me some Scotty Scheffler. Bryson is still on the range. He's an absolute legend, dude. Cheers to my guy Bryson out there. A little bit of bourbon in the cup, as you guys could probably see. Yes, we can do a little deep dive here on Xander real quick. So Xander Schauffele, he kind of went under the radar today. He's never really been in contention all week, but today he gained off the tee, gained on approach, and in fact, all 4 stat categories was out there into the green. So stat-wise, he's at like a 7 out of 10. You know, it's not the perfect stat profile where it was almost all the ball striking that went out there and carried him, but a balanced stat profile where you're green across all 4 categories is never something that I'm going to look at in a bad way. Jumping in late, but congrats on my amazing day on the props. I appreciate you, Sean, on that. I had a really rough start this week, man. Like, that's the thing I like to do with this too, is like give guys perspective on how betting goes. I didn't hit a slip for days 1 and 2. Like, I was on the offer. I was on the schneid out there for Thursday, Friday. And then it's crazy how it all comes together. I had so many like 1-and-1s on my 2-leg slips, so many parlays. I had a 4-leg parlay that was going to pay like 10x that ended up missing by Phil Mickelson missing the cut. It's crazy how if you just keep doing the right things, right? Don't change your process, stick to it. That great things happen when you do that, right? When you have a process you believe in that you know is solid, eventually it is going to come around. So I say that too to everyone out there that maybe didn't have their best showdown day today. I had an okay one myself, but like even if you did have a slightly down day, like stick to it, man. Like your process, you working on that is what is going to take you to a positive ROI. It's not, changing your process day after day. So yeah, I know it's a little bit of a random comment based on that, but it's true. Definitely stick to the process, guys. It paid off massively for me today. Aubert deep dive, another second place maybe. So, dude, I was on my way over to my parents' house earlier, obviously not watching the golf as I'm driving, and Aubert went from -3 to -6 out of nowhere. So I didn't get to see him going out there and cooking today. It looks like it was mostly the putter that was getting the job done. But if he can return to round 1, where it was that tee to green play where he really stood out, then yeah, maybe it is a good second place finish spot for him. But yeah, unless something crazy happens with Rory and Bryson, second place is likely as far as he's going to go. A Hatton deep dive. So I'm sure hoping that Hatton can finish in the top 5. I have some exposure over there on the betting side. Today, though, he gained off the tee and lost 3 strokes with the off approach play. Yikes. I don't know if I can get over that iron play, but I sure hope he turns it around for my sake. Thoughts on Xander? Can he jump into the top 5? For sure can, Jason. The stat profile isn't overly great, but it's good enough for me to say that he has a chance to do so. I have no idea what this guy's saying, but I'm going to send him on his way. He seems a little drunk or something like that. Scotty at the Olympics was another great last round. For sure. Yeah, right. Not even just the players. He had a few of those last year. What's going on, Joseph? Patty Reed top 5 would pay for a lot of blends. Yeah, top 5 on hand would pay for some blends for me. And Matt McCarty too, guys. I mean, a lot of you guys know, right? I talked up McCarty heading into this week. The only person in human history that would even have the balls to talk up McCarty at a major championship. But yeah, dude, if he finishes top 10 for me, I've got a plus 3,000 bet out there on that. So I would love that. And dude, yeah, if you want to share some blends with me, man, cheers to you on that. He said, Luke, you got your first DFS second place thanks to my info. Cheers to you. Maybe we can make it one better out there tomorrow. For single entry, should I steer clear of playing Bryson and Rory together? Yeah, man, if I was in single entry, I would stick away from playing both of those because I feel like you're going to get people that just play that core and then try and, kind of get funky down towards the bottom. I'm okay with using one or the two, though. That's probably what I would do personally and what I will do out there tomorrow. Bryson, X, Day, Reed, and Im. Is that too much chalk? So yeah, the Bryson chalk is your main piece there. But guys like Xander, Day, and Reed, yeah, I think that is a little bit too chalky, right? That's 5 players that are starting towards the top 20. I would take at least one of those out, if not 2 of them. It kind of depends on the contest you're entering. Or if you're in like a smaller field single entry, then you could probably take out 1 and get away with it. But large field GPP, like the big 5 or 25, I consider taking out 2 and trying to find some leverage. Almost ace 16 on that run was dialed in towards the end. Yeah, I know I was there for that one. So I was at my parents' house by the time I saw that, but that was pretty sweet. Thoughts on Spawn? So JJ Spawn starting a little bit further back. I also have a top 10 bet on him. So, I mean, if he has a nuclear day, that would really be nice for my betting exposure. If I could hit the U, that would be great over here. Stat-wise, though, he's a 4 out of 10. I mean, this is below average stuff when you're losing on approach, losing in 3 of the 4 different stat categories, but it's always the or he could with these guys that are down here at T48. If you're going to use a JJ Spawn, it's to try and get some leverage. So he was decent with the off-the-tee play yesterday. Round 1 was his best round by far, at least when it comes to these shots gained metrics. I'm personally not a massive fan of this just because it feels like there's better guys you could take towards the bottom, people with a little bit more of a glimmer of hope. But if you're in that $5 or $25, it is going to give you a sub 5% owned play. And that is massive when you're trying to leverage against the field. You forgot Hatton was playing until they actually showed a clip. Yeah, man, it's kind of like the Phil one. They didn't show him until he was battling the cut line and then choked over there on Friday. I think they're kind of unfair to some of these live guys, or you can't ignore Bryson because he's in contention. You can't ignore John Rahm when he's having the round that he had today. But unfortunate, I would say. And I think it has a lot to do with the politics that we have in professional golf right now, which I feel like the Masters does a decent job with. They try and cover both sides as much as they can, but there's still a little bit of that bias creeping in. You've got Rory, Bryson, and Connors for outright bets. That is a really good spot to be in, Joe, heading into Sunday. So best of luck to you out there. Cheers to you. And then you're looking at Davis Riley out there for round number 4. So good old Davis Riley. I always default to the stats on this sort of play. Today, I know he struggled because I bet against him on props, and it ended up working out. But you can see over here, he lost 3 strokes short game, which he's usually a lot better than that in those 2 categories. So yeah, a little bit of a bounce back shots gained profile over here with the Davis Riley. But that's all I've got for the round 4 live stream, guys. Best of luck with all the exposure that you guys are going to be getting to. Smash that like button if you guys haven't already. And I hope to see you guys towards the top of some of those GPPs. On the SHIPIT Nation site, of course, we've got all the projections out there for Sunday. Those will be posted, I'm assuming, shortly over there on the site. And make sure to check out my Patreon page for all the content that I'm doing. So I'm separate from the SHIPIT Nation at this point, doing my own projections, player poll, that sort of stuff. SHIPIT Nation has the best website out there for all the different DFS sports that you're entering. And of course, got some added stuff over there on my Patreon page to go out there and check out too. But that's all I've got, guys. Best of luck, as I was mentioning before. And I'll see you guys out there for the rest of the content this year.